Hi everyone, this is Karal Muhammad, a university professor from the holy city of Karbala. In today's lecture, we'll explore categories of verbs, a key topic that connects the verbs with the different types of objects and complements that we've studied previously. We'll explain how different sentence patterns depend on the type of verb used, and how verbs are categorized into intransitive, transitive, ditransitive, and complex transitive. في جلسة هذا اليوم سنتحدث عن موضوع مهم في قواعد اللغة الإنجليزية، وهو أنواع الأفعال أو تصنيفات الأفعال categories of verbs. هذا الموضوع يربط بين الفعل وأنواع المفاعيل والمتممات أو التكملات في الجملة. بكلمات أخرى، كيف نضع الأفعال في تصنيفات معينة وفقا للتكملة والمفعول. كذلك سنتعرف على الفرق بين الفعل اللازم والمتعدي والمتعدي لمفعولين والمعقد وغيرها من الأفعال. The objectives. You students will be able to define and distinguish intransitive, intensive, extensive, intransitive, transitive, ditransitive, and complex transitive verbs. Also, you're going to identify which verbs require objects or complements. Let's get started. There are different types of verbs corresponding closely to different types of object and complement. So the different types of verbs depend on the type of object and complements. In other words, verbs are categorized into different categories depending on the objects and complements. For example, sentences such as to and three, which have subject complements, have intensive verbs, and all other sentences have extensive verbs. The later are intransitive verb, as in the following. So basically, verbs are categorized into intensive, extensive, and intransitive. Let's define intensive verb. Intensive verbs, also called linking verbs, do not take an object but require a subject complement to describe or identify, such as the girl is now a student at a large university. Is here an intensive verb. Also, his brother grew happier, grew an intensive verb as well. الأفعال الرابطة لا تحتاج إلى مفعول به بل تحتاج إلى متمم اسمي اللي هو subject complement يكمل المعنى ويصف الفاعل كما أوضحنا في الجمل أعلاه. Extensive verbs. We're going to explain them in this text. Now let's move to the intransitive verbs. An intransitive verb does not take any objects or complements. For example, it trained steadily all day. Intransitive يقابله في اللغة العربية الفعل اللازم هو الفعل الذي لا يحتاج إلى مفعول به بل يكتفي بالفعل والفاعل. على سبيل المثال, it trained steadily all day. You might be wondering, but what about steadily and all day? Both of these are adverbials. They're not complements or objects. Now let's move to the last category, which is extensive verb. An extensive verb is the transitive verb. الextensive verb هو نفس الtransitive verb، لكن ما المقصود بالtransitive verb؟ الtransitive verb يقابله في اللغة العربية الفعل المتعدي. Transitive verbs can be defined as those verbs which take a direct object. And we have, a bunch of examples here. John carefully searched the room. Search is considered a transitive verb. They had given the girl an apple. Given here is a transitive verb. They make him the chairman every year. Make is a transitive verb. الفعل المتعدي هو الفعل الذي يتعدى إلى مفعول به واحد أو أكثر من مفعول. وأمثلة على ذلك هي John carefully searched the room. Search يعتبر فعل متعدي. He had given the girl an apple. Given أيضا فعل متعدي. They make him the chairman every year. Make يعتبر فعل متعدي. And transitive verbs are subdivided into three types: ditransitive, complex transitive, monotransitive. Let's highlight each one of them. Ditransitive verbs are those verbs that permit an indirect object, and these will be distinguished as, ditransitive. In other words, those verbs that take a direct and indirect objects, because die here is a prefix that means to. الدايترانسيتيف هو نوع من أنواع الأفعال الذي يتعدى إلى مفعولين: مفعول به مباشر ومفعول به غير مباشر. مثال على ذلك: He had given the girl an apple. Given here تعدى إلى مفعولين: المفعول الأول اللي هو the girl ويعتبر مفعول به غير مباشر، وan apple اللي هو المفعول به المباشر. Another type of transitive verbs, which is complex transitive. And complex transitive can be defined as those verbs that take an object complement. وcomplex transitive اللي هو الفعل المتعدي المعقد هو الفعل الذي يتعدى إلى تكملة المفعول به. والobject complement مثال على ذلك: They make him the chairman. إذن المake هنا يعتبر complex transitive. لما نسميه معقد؟ لأنه يتعدى إلى مفعول وتكملة، كلاهما في نفس الجملة. The last type, which is monotransitive. A monotransitive verb is a kind of verb that takes only one object, which is, the direct object. Why the direct object? Because the direct object is an essential and we cannot eliminate it, just like we explained in the previous lecture. والفعل المتعدي إلى مفعول واحد mono اللي هي prefix وتأتي بمعنى واحد أو مفرد. monotransitive أي الفعل المتعدي الذي يتعدى إلى مفعول به واحد، والمفعول به هذا بطبيعة الحال مفعول به مباشر. مثال على ذلك: John carefully searched the room. إذن search هنا يعتبر monotransitive. To sum it up, verbs are categorized depending on the objects and complements. And the categories of verbs are as follows: intensive, which are the linking verbs; extensive verbs, which are otherwise the transitive verbs, and the transitive verbs are those verbs that take a direct object. And these are subdivided into ditransitive, which take two objects, and complex transitive, which take an object and a complement, and a monotransitive that takes only one object. And the last category, intransitive verb, and as its name suggests, a kind of verbs that do not take an object. For example, it rained steadily all day. It did not take, an object or complements. All right, I guess it's pretty clear. See you later.